All right, being 6 p.m. on Monday, November the 4th, I will call to order the meeting of the regular Winooski City Council. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance led by Deputy Mayor Hal Colston.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is agenda review. I actually would like to add an item to the agenda today. We all received a letter from the Office of the Attorney General regarding an opiate litigation case, and they are looking for an opt-out due by November 22nd. We will not have another regular meeting before then, so I want to add this to the end of tonight's agenda. Any concerns about that? Any questions from the public? So I would entertain a motion to add this item. Item H would become approval opiate legislation.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Amy, second by Hal. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. We will adjust the agenda. I also want to make a point of clarification that the online agenda shows city updates as item number 6 and council reports as item number 7. The hard copy and what we are actually going to do tonight is the reverse, so council updates before city updates. With that, we can move on to public comment. Is there anyone joining us that would like to make a public comment about an item that is not included in tonight's agenda? Sir, please introduce yourself, and if you wouldn't mind coming forward. You don't have to.
John Ames, Winooski homeowner, and I live in the 65 decibel noise zone of the F-35. And I'm here to speak in support of an amendment that has been put on to this memorandum of understanding between Burlington, South Burlington, and Winooski. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, that is still in negotiation. We haven't taken that up as a council yet.
Anyway, are you familiar with the amendments too that have been put on there? They're proposed amendments that have been added.
What proposed amendment are you referring to?
Oh, a whole bunch of them. That were James Lee's the attorney.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I guess it hasn't gotten to you yet. I don't know what the process is. But anyway, on that amendment, on that memorandum of understanding, one of the many things suggested is the cancellation of F-35. And I've long been an opponent of the F-35. It's unreasonable, unnecessary, violates military practice code of putting citizens in harm's way. So I hope that you could amend, as proposed, the memorandum of understanding. And I'll make sure you get that.
Yeah, thank you. I'm due to meet with South Burlington and Burlington sometime soon. The date is not set yet to finalize that. So if I don't see that, I will ask about it as well.
Thank you very much.
And then we can take that into consideration when it comes to us for approval. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comment this evening? All right, we will then move on to our consent agenda. We have 2 items to approve tonight, the City Council and Liquor Control minutes of our October 29th meeting and the warrant ending November 1st, 2019. Any questions or comments about the consent agenda? Any questions or comments from the public? So I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda items.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mike, second by Amy. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Council reports. I will start down here with you, Jim.
Okay. I don't think I've actually done a single thing since we met last Tuesday, except I will say I almost got to attend the fire open house, and I got a great picture of my daughter from my wife attending it, but I wanted to say thanks to the fire department for hosting that, because it was a really attentive event. They were really involved and engaged with at least the kid that I know of that showed up, and I know there were other people there, so I'm just appreciative they made that effort and provided that access for our community this past Sunday.
Thank you.
No report.
I also have no report.
I think, Jim, you're forgetting our great meeting at the Winooski Housing Authority
Thank you, Amy.
that we did on Friday.
I thought I did something.
Last week was kind of a blur, so we met with about 7 or 8 seniors at the Winooski Housing Authority on East Spring Street and just let them know what we are up to as a council, some of the priorities that we're working on, and receive their feedback. And it went really well. They actually asked us to come back on a quarterly basis, so that was great.
Thank you.
I'd just like to do a reminder, now that we turned the clocks back, it's getting dark outside early, and for people to use the crosswalks and to try to dress in light colors. On the way here today, I had some kids yelling at me because I didn't see them coming down Main Street by juniors in the mini mall. There are a lot of cars, a lot of parked cars, and if you're not using the crosswalks, cars may not be able to see you. So just a friendly reminder that people are watching out there.
Thank you. Moving on to city updates.
Great, thank you very much. So a number of updates for you tonight. We're kind of going to jam in a couple of things given that our next meeting won't be till the beginning of December. First, we want to congratulate the Winooski Burlington Youth Football Team. They won the Northern Vermont Youth Football League Championship on Saturday, beating South Burlington 26-12. So it's great news. Well done, Alicia and Ray, for supporting that group. Alicia, do you want to add anything to that?
Oh, no, I'm very proud of the kids in the program, and it's really cool to see Winooski kiddos and Burlington kiddos come together and not let there be the bridge in the way, and we're 2 cities strong. It's pretty cool to see that and to see the relationships that were built, and very impressed that they got that far. They really came a long way.
I worked really hard.
It was a great opportunity to watch all the kids grow.
And thank you for all your support staffing them this season as well. Similar to Councilor Meyer's reminder about it getting dark, also getting dark means snow is coming. So we have pushed out our annual reminder about our winter parking ban. So just as a reminder to the community, during winter parking bans, overnight parking is prohibited on all city streets. We highly recommend that you sign up for Nixle alerts. That's the best way to get notification directly to your phone when a winter parking ban is in effect. And you can do that by texting Winooski, the name of our community, Winooski, to 888-777. So again, that's 888-7777. Text Winooski and you will be signed up for those alerts, or go onto our website to register as well. Additional reminder about parking is that from December 1st through March 31st, so not for another month, but starting December 1st, overnight parking in the downtown is prohibited every night. So that's from 2:30 a.m. to 6 a.m. We also want to remind you, we put out a notice about this today, that the Vermont Air National Guard has announced that they will be conducting night operations starting tomorrow night through November 22nd. We're very thankful that they give us a heads up about this ahead of time. This is really to keep their, maintain their tactical proficiencies with flying in the dark. They have indicated that the schedule suggests that they will be done by 8 p.m. every night. So it won't be overnight, but just during the early dark hours. We shared this last time, but Eric would like to remind you that the DRB is meeting tomorrow night here in City Council chambers to talk about the Main and Mansion, to consider the Main and Mansion appeal. And then the Planning Commission is scheduled to meet on Thursday night for their regular November meeting, and are doing a walking tour of downtown before that meeting. Eli and Lieutenant Charkalis and I, Eli is our Community Justice Center Director, attended a CJC summit with leaders throughout Chittenden County last week. The Department of Corrections, who's the primary funder of community justice programs across the state, has suggested to the Chittenden County communities that we look at how to find some administrative efficiencies. 5 CJC centers are funded in Chittenden County, which is significantly more than any other county in the state. So they're looking to achieve some efficiencies. So we are talking as a county team on how to achieve that. One of the things we heard very strongly at that summit, and we advocated for as well, is a real priority on community-based services, so ensuring that restorative practices stay implemented in communities, even if they are administered in a central location. So more to come on that, but wanted to let you know that those conversations are happening. Angela and I spent much of the morning today with Vermont Economic Progress Council, both staff and board members. They were conducting their annual tax increment financing district monitoring site visit. We talked to them for an hour and a half and then gave them a walking tour of the TIF district and received some very positive comments. And it was fun to show off what has been accomplished, including Ray and Alicia, the mural under the bridge. They were very excited about that. So just wanted to give you that update. Wanted to echo Jim's thanks to the fire department for a great open house this weekend, and thanks to the members of the community that came out. That's something they're going to be looking to do on a more regular basis, so stay tuned for more information about that. Finally, a couple fun events and programs coming up. The annual Run Your Can Off event at Gilbrook will be held on November 16th from 9 to 3. That's a road race, a trail race, raising money for the food shelf. There's more information about it on the website if you're interested. As I shared last time, the first Turkey Bowl community flag football game is scheduled for Saturday, November 23rd at Richard Park. And then we are also offering a 2-day CPR first aid class taught by our school resource officer, Jason Zeiter, on December 10th and 12th. So if people in the community are interested in renewing their certification, they are welcome to participate. And then there's a whole bunch of upcoming winter community services programs scheduled, and registration will be available in the coming weeks. We really encourage you to like the Recreation Facebook page for more information about registering for those events. That's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we will move on to our regular items. First up is item A, discussion Winooski Valley Parks District.
These are, I'll take them back when you're done unless you'd like to have them. But this is my presentation, and instead of stretching you through the entire presentation, I can do the more efficient kind of brief.
And I get the privilege of doing a quick intro here of Nick Warner, who's the executive director over at Winooski Valley Park District. He's going to share the bulk of the content, but just wanted to start by saying Park District is a huge asset for us here as a department, community services wise. Providing a lot of technical assistance around conservation conversations we're having for some of our more sensitive properties, and also just a great sounding board when it comes to park management. Tim in particular and Lauren, who are two of Nick's staff, have been a huge boost for us in the last year and done some great work. So definitely a strong partner, despite not having a footprint here, a huge part of our work in the community services department.
That might change.
Yeah.
So new faces every year. I'm just going to give you a quick 5-minute presentation and field some questions because I know you have a packed agenda tonight. This is our annual check-in with you guys. For those of you not familiar with us, Winooski Valley Park District has 7 member towns who've been in existence since 1972. And we own and manage 19 properties, about 1,750 acres. Across the 7 towns who were members. Winooski was one of our original charter members, going way back. And the whole concept of our organization, we're both a nonprofit and incorporated municipalities, so we both participate in statewide insurance and support programs as a municipality, but we can also operate as a nonprofit to bring resources in. The whole concept of the agency is that we function more efficiently in that we are able to combine resources and use a relatively small staff and budget to manage a lot of land. And every year I'm always astonished at how much we get done, frankly, because my staff is quite efficient. Just a quick update now, you have the materials, I believe,
in our packet.
A whole bunch of stuff. All right, so you understand what our operating budget is and what our annual ask is. I also gave you a breakdown of how the annual ask is arrived at, which is something people ask every year, so I make sure I put that out in detail so you know exactly how the dollar amount is arrived just a quick update. This has been a really busy year. We have a new park and another new one on the way. The former Rivers and Marina down on the other side in Burlington, we purchased in 2018, and we're about to knock the buildings down using a FEMA grant, and we're using a Vermont Community Foundation grant to renaturalize the property. So it's going to be a brand new 2.4 acre site. We can go down and launch your canoe, and it's just beautiful. It's right there at the Winooski River mouth. There's another property in Williston called the Jacob parcel. We're working with the town now on potentially taking over that parcel. It's a 29-acre park. So that's going quite well. We've got 2 other properties in Colchester. We're in negotiation on a potential trail easement in Jericho, and another property in Essex, which is a little less likely. And there's another property in Burlington that we've been working on for the last couple of years to acquire. It's all an incremental process. We don't do huge growth, so these are relatively minor properties from a large perspective. And I just want to emphasize, Winooski has super high value conservation areas within its borders. Just astonishingly high values at Cassavant especially, but also Catlin Island. I don't know if you realize how long the island is in the middle of the river there, and Memorial Park. And from a conservation and archaeological standpoint, these are absolute gems. So just, I want to mention that every year to make you realize what you have within your town. We work really closely with Ray and Alicia and Jesse. And some things we're doing this year is we're Lauren Chakotay, who was on our staff, who could not be here tonight, she's not feeling well, who lives in Winooski, full disclosure. She's working with Alicia and Ray on the 10-minute walk grant, which has been a great experience. We're also going to be helping with the parks planning process over this next year, which we're thrilled you guys are doing. There's a broad goal to get a canoe launch reestablished, so we've been really working hard on that, and the technical and ownership and erosion factors have been tricky, but we may have a potential location down by Memorial, so that's pretty exciting. We've done a lot of maintenance this year, both on a sort of pro bono, but also on a contracted basis, little bits and pieces here helping to bring our crew down when you guys have a need with your parks, and that's worked really well. And in general, we have a real strong interest in the evolution of the trail system around here, both going down along the side of the Winooski River and also the plan to go through Cassavant someday. I don't know if that's ever going to happen, but an elevated boardwalk that could connect up with Gorge Road in Essex. And I have no idea where that planning process is, but that's something that really intrigues us and we'd like to be a partner with. And in the future, we've had some discussions about Memorial Park. My board is highly intrigued with that parcel in terms of the potential for the park district potentially becoming an owner of that parcel. Whether that's the right thing for the town, I think is part of what you guys are going to establish over the next year. So you will we'll probably be back before you at some point in the spring or early summer, I'm guessing, to discuss that. Whatever the outcome is, my board's philosophy is that if a piece of land needs to go into conservation, if it's us or if it's another entity, they're both considered conservation wins. So a lot of what we do is work with towns and with the state of Vermont Fish and Wildlife and with the various land trusts on sort of this whole mix of organizations it takes to do acquisitions and management. And I guess what makes us unique is that you guys have control over what we do. So we're like the municipal version of what a lot of the other land trusts are doing at a larger scale. So there's my 5-minute presentation. I hope you kept a nice impact for you. And any questions or issues or concerns?
Well, thank you for coming in,
Yeah.
and I want to reiterate staff appreciation for the work that you do here. I personally have some questions about financials, but I wanted to first see if anyone has questions about what it is that Winooski Valley Parks District is doing for us, or any of the programming.
I had a question about your relationship with the Association of Africans Living in Vermont. That was in
Yes.
the presentation. I was just wondering if you could elaborate on that.
Sure. That's been I think it's been going on for 8 or 10 years now. work with Alicia Laramie. We have a farm field down at Ethan Allen Park that we've been leasing to them for a number of years, and it's been a real symbiotic relationship. They do, I mean, it's not just a farm plot, it's related to the whole community that's been using our facility for a number of years. And that's something that is, I can't see, you know, we want to keep that going as long as possible. It's been a very positive. If you go, you go to the homestead especially on a Thursday afternoon, everything's happening. You've got that program going on. You've got the community gardening. You've got Sarah Holbrook Center. You've got all these different groups doing similar things. So that's all part of sort of the DNA of how we operate.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I wanted to start by, there's obviously a funding ask in here.
Yes.
That we have, I know we discussed last year, and I would imagine several years in the past, considering how far apart we are right now and what we are funding.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you can provide this information or if it would come from staff. I would like to see how, so we've been contributing $5,000 a year. Like, when did we start to diverge on that? And how long has that been a trend?
Well, at the end of 2012, there was a gap until fiscal year 2015 or 16 when I first came on board. And then the good news is the city is giving us money each year, and it is part of your budget that is not, you know, it's not a charitable contribution. You guys actually put it in a part of the budget. So we've all seen that as a positive. What's different about Winooski is we don't own land here. We used to manage CASA bonds. And for a bunch of reasons, that relationship, you know, it was financial, it was practical, it was, I think there was some friction around the development and where, you know, how far that was going to go. That was all before my time. And when I came on board, I saw opportunity to rebuild the relationship, first with Deke and then with Jesse and with Ray, obviously. And so I feel like we're actually on a good track. My board would love to have me come in and say, where's the money? But they also understand the context of it, which is we're all kind of in the same foxhole. So I feel as if what we've done over the last couple of years, I don't know if you guys agree, is sort of build a relationship that's necessary before we can legitimately come in and say, you know, we need the full remuneration.
And context on the sort of charitable money comment, which I think predates everybody at that table there, but previously the city had $20,000 each year that was set aside to be given out to various nonprofits, and 2 counselors and a staff member, it had been me for a number of years, would get together and sort of decide, all right, 500 for you, 1,000 for you, 4,000 for you, out of this 20,000. And so for many years, the Park District's allocation, which had been about $4,000, was coming out of that 20. So in essence, it was soft money every year. There was no guarantee that that was going to be given to the Park District, depending on what those councilors decided to recommend. So one of the first steps that we took, and Nick and I and Deke before talked a lot about it, is getting that base level $4,000 stabilized in the general fund. So that, I don't remember the exact year that happened. I think it was 15 or 16.
I think it's 15 or 16. And, you know, ironically, we hired Deke after she left here. They said, what do we do? And she did a great job. And one of the big points she made is she said, you need to build that core relationship. And you need to build value in your relationship with Winooski and towns generally in order to solidify. And when I came in, you know, there were some issues with other towns not making full payments and so forth, and just through relationship building, and I think our performance, we're able to get that going. So I actually feel more positive about where we're going here. I think my board would like to see me come home with more money, but I think it's all in the context that we're building a relationship here, and the city needs to make decisions about their parkland that they're not ready to make yet. And I think that's all positive.
And I think a big part of having Lauren at the table through this parks planning process as one of the core kind of leaders of the committee is to have that perspective, and I think help guide some of those decision points as we move. So like Nick said, I think there's a lot of synergy between the way that we're thinking about those parcels and the way the Park District is thinking about those parcels, but at the end of the day, that's a community decision, not one for Nick and I to sit here and make. So that's the point of this parks planning process, is to see what comes out the other end and and then make a game plan to operationalize that accordingly.
Does that address your question?
Yeah, and I would just say, like, for your context and for the rest of council, there are several partners that we have, you know, there's some gap in funding. There's a bigger discussion that we need to have about where we want to allocate money throughout the budget and what we can and cannot meet there.
Mhm.
But hearing some of that context is helpful to understand, like, how we are so far apart at this point,
Yep.
and what the future might look like. I also wanted to ask about, for the last 2 years, you've had this, I believe last year and this year both, there was a 6.5% increase in operations costs. But the increase that you've asked from contributing communities is lower than that. And so I'm
Yes.
curious how you're looking at that and how you're making that work.
Well, starting about 2.5 years ago, we started doing contracting. And initially, it's mostly with South Burlington. When they passed their parks bond, we negotiated with them. It's a very simple system. We do work for them on lands that they own. This is for non-park district lands. And we charge basically our hourly rate plus FICA times 50%. So it's a good deal for them and it's a good deal for us. And it's a very flexible arrangement. We've done the same thing with you guys on a smaller scale. We've done the same thing with the town of Williston and with Winooski Natural Resources District. And we've done a little bit with Jericho. And we're expanding this, and we're doing it incrementally because you have to be careful not to create a situation where you're not taking care of your own assets. But it's grown incrementally over the last couple of years, and we, for the first time, this time around, we're putting it in as a part of our stated income in our budget. Whereas before it was more speculative, and so we said, okay, we're going to put that in capital. You know, if it turns out to be profitable, we'll put it in capital. We found it is profitable, it is steady. It's not having a negative impact on our organization. So that's how we're able to raise our budget and keep the allocations percentage lower for the towns. I want to continue that trend. I mean, it's a tough ask each year. We're not a membership organization, so we're not going out and sending letters to compete with the land trusts who work with us, who help us get money to buy land. So there's this system in place that puts us in a spot which is very positive. But we have to maintain our own budget stability to be able to do that. So that's how we're able to do this, through the contracting.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Have there been any user surveys to look at where visitors to different parks are coming from? Because I mean, I know I've been to several of these in the past couple of weeks, but I'm just curious if you have done any kind of formal trail surveys or anything like that.
We did a couple years ago. And I'd be happy to send that data out. It's very interesting. I mean, you know, the bigger parks are, you have people from all over. You know, Colchester Pond and Ethan Allen Homestead draws from all over the place. The smaller parks are obviously more locals. But it's a pretty wide variety. We're actually quite surprised at the geographic spread. Of course, you know, getting information to do recreational stuff is so much easier now. So people target the location they go to a lot more than they used to.
Other questions from council? Questions from the public? Yeah, I just want to say that I am looking forward to seeing the results of what comes out of your involvement in this Parks and Open Space Plan. I think there could be it sounds like there could be a big shift from what our current kind of environment or working relationship is. So we'll definitely be looking forward to that.
Yes.
And we will have this information under consideration as we approach our budgeting cycle as well.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you for coming in.
Appreciate your time. Yep.
Thanks, Nick.
Thanks, Ray. Thanks, Jessica.
I also like your environmental approach to
Yes.
reuse.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
No quiz.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming in.
Oh, you bet. Thank you.
So the next item on the agenda, item B, is up for approval. This is going to be presented by Jesse Baker about entering into negotiations with Medi Real Estate on a development agreement for the sale and redevelopment of Lot 7D at 17 Abenaki Way.
Thank you. So I've invited up Heather Carrington, our Community and Economic Development Officer as well. She has done definitely the majority of the heavy lifting on the work to get us here. And I think it's worth noting for the public that we did have an executive session on the RFP responses at your last meeting, and now this is bringing forward a recommendation for you in public session. So I will give the high-level recommendation, and then if you have any detailed questions, Heather can kind of walk you through not only the process, but what's being proposed. So our high-level recommendation is to authorize me on behalf of the city to enter into negotiations with Nettie Real Estate for the redevelopment of Lot 70 or 17 Abenaki Way. They were one of the respondents to the RFP that we've had out on the street since July, and definitely bring the highest development potential to the site, as well as realizing the community's goals of building new parking infrastructure, bringing a hotel to the city, and creating additional Winooski-based employment options for our residents. So we believe this is the highest and best value proposal thus far for Lot 7D, and ask for your permission to enter into negotiations. Obviously, whatever would come out of those negotiations would have to ultimately come to you for approval.
Nothing to add.
Nothing to add there?
If you have questions about details, she's your woman.
Sure.
So I would add a point of clarification for viewers that we are referring to the plot of land that last year on town meeting, or actually this year, at the previous town meeting day, voters approved building a new parking garage there, and with the intent to also develop a hotel. That the original plans have shifted. The original developer that we were talking to has shifted focus, and so now we're looking for this new, fitting a new opportunity there, still with the parking garage. I'm not sure what we're allowed to reveal out of executive session. I would just say that for me personally, I think the discussion we had about who to move forward with of the proposers aligns to what you presented here. Are there questions from council about any of the details that have now been shared here? Any questions from the public? I would, I guess, then entertain a motion to approve Jesse entering into negotiations with Nettie for the redevelopment of Lot 7D.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Hal, second by Mike. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
And if I can just add one statement for the public, if you are interested, because as the mayor said, this has been an ongoing public conversation for about a year of what is being proposed. The proposal is linked on our website, as well as renderings. We did not go through them tonight, but they are available on the website, city's website, if anyone is interested in checking out those details.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Heather.
So next for item C, we will welcome Alexander, is he here? Yes, there you are. Welcome our treasurer, Alexander Anastasia Hill, to give us the quarterly report.
Good evening, City Council and Honorable Mayor. It's a pleasure to present the quarter one actuals for the City of Winooski. We compare the actuals against sort of the annual budget and also any departmental adjustments that we've made against our projections to see if anything there is kind of presenting a risk to the city financially. Sort of just jumping right into review, the general fund projects a surplus of $124,000. There were sort of some isolated expenditure overages, but these were surpassed by projections that we're going to have significant savings in health insurance, as well as a variety of income line items, which I like to see. If we have one significant item that's pushing up our surplus, we don't like to see that, because if one item drops, the entire thing falls out. And this has been a recurring theme in prior quarterly reports, where we like to see a variety of surpluses. Reviewing the water fund and the wastewater fund, reviewing them together. Obviously, we're projecting sort of significant deficiencies in the revenue, but the actuals the budget is based off prior year actuals. So when we move into the next quarter, as we have updated billing rates, we should see those numbers in revenue accounts improve drastically. This is something that I would expect for you to hear a follow-up on, to make sure that my expectations are that this does bump back up. And if it doesn't, I'll present that as a significant concern. Similarly, with the combined parking garage fund, We've fully discounted any revenue relating to the Abenaki garage along with the My Web Grocer contract. Certainly we could see some increased activity in this perhaps coming into the next quarter. So if we do, right now they've been fully discounted to 0. So if we do see any activity there, that deficiency will close a little bit. So that's another item that I would want to certainly follow up on as hopefully that will close. Just reviewing as we're sort of early in the year, sometimes it's nice just to review the percentage of the budget that we've consumed already, just, either against prior years or just 25%. There were no other present concerns that were not already built into the budget, so that is a positive note. Reviewing the TIF fund, there does appear to be an initial positive variance of a little over $20,000 against the year-end budget. However, all these activities and surpluses were sort of singular events. Property taxes, auditing fees, they're not necessarily representative of economic activity. But certainly it's nice to see a positive net fund variance anyways. Just reviewing the financials overall, there's nothing that is presenting a financial risk. I would like to kind of keep track of some of the economic activity as far as the water fund and the combined parking garage. But currently, business continues as usual. If you have any questions, I'm certainly happy to answer them now or can do a little bit more research.
Thank you. I appreciate you flagging the areas that you are focused on as well for follow-up. I think for me and for the general public, your closing sentence that we continue to operate within financial expectations and retain a low level of risk is great news to continue to hear. So kudos, staff. Are there any questions from council? Any concerns?
I got a question. The community service program, there's something that says some outstanding balances are due to the city. Are those, there's no number here. Is it a high number? Is it a low
Not
number?
enough to impact the budget, no.
Okay.
And so currently that's been fully discounted because we don't want to budget aggressively. So there might be a surplus coming in there, but I wouldn't say, woohoo, we got $30,000 coming in. This is probably between 5 to 10, but I could get back to you with a more accurate number on that.
Any other questions?
This may be more of a question for Heather, but in terms of the parking garage deficit that we're looking at, do we think that the wayfinding could, when that's fully implemented, chip away at some of that, or is that hard to project?
Not having what the current parking numbers are, I couldn't speak to that authoritatively. I certainly think that there are ways that we could improve utilization of that parking garage, and wayfinding is one of those ways we could improve the utilization. So I would expect it would have a positive impact, but I wouldn't be able to speak authoritatively to that.
Okay, thank you.
If I can add to that just a little bit, as the treasurer appropriately pointed out on the parking garage projections, there's a significant, which is I think what you're suggesting, there's a significant revenue deficit projected, in part due to the My Web Grocer contract, which is the first line of that budget. So they, under their parking agreement, they have a right essentially to give back some spaces, not on a permanent basis, but on a month-to-month usage. So they have exercised that option, which is why you're seeing a decreased revenue projection here. We are also working with them, and they are working very hard to fully lease up their space, which would result in them re-upping a parking commitment. So we are optimistic that this number won't carry forward through the whole year, but it is current, based on, as the treasurer mentions, current usage rates, it is what would be projected.
Any questions from the public? No final questions from council? Well, thank you again for the update. Always good to hear about our financial security.
Thank you. Have a great evening.
You too.
Thanks, Alex.
Next item D, this is on for approval. This is East Allen recommendations.
So we wanted to, just by way of table setting as John setting up. Bring this back to you. We had an excellent discussion about these scoping study recommendations at a prior meeting. But because this scoping study is wrapping up and we're really trying to get down to kind of tangible recommendations, we wanted to bring back what we think we heard from you all as direction, just for a final review and potential approval, to be able to wrap up that scoping work. And Dave Saladino from VHB is here with folks from CRPC as well, and John, and can walk you through, again, what we think we've heard, to make sure that we are all on the same page.
Well, welcome back and thanks for coming again.
Yes, thank you for having me.
So I'll just give a quick overview again. So basically, during the October 7th meeting, we gave an overview of the East Allen Gateway Corridor Scoping Study. So that study basically goes from the circulator all the way to Rolling Court through the corridor. And during that study, we identified really 3 main focus areas to hone in on, where we observed some issues and sort of the best improvement options for the corridor. So during those discussions, as Jesse mentioned, we got some great feedback from the council. We want to make sure that we incorporated that feedback during the drawings that you have in your package, but we'll go through each of those. So the main sort of discussion points we heard was, incorporating more on-street parking, specifically for that sort of retail zone, focus area 1. And looking at focus area 2, we provided 2 alternative options. One was, I would say, sort of a lofty goal of realigning East Allen Street or East Spring Street with some better geometry. Obviously, that's a major cost impact versus potentially a signalization option. So what we kind of heard was the signalization option would be more preferred because it meets the goals of the study and it's less costly. And then focus area 3, there, I don't think we heard a lot of feedback on that section, so there weren't really any changes, but we just want to go over again just to make sure you're all comfortable with it. So I think ultimately the ask for this is, if there are any additional comments, we'd like to hear them. And if not, an endorsement for the route we're going for this corridor. So again, this is a planning study, so it's a basis of design. It's not to say, this is what the corridor is going to look like, in the next couple of years or even 10 years from now. There's a lot of unknown factors with development along the corridor and, VTrans funding that could sort of change some of the elements, but this is sort of the base design that we're looking at right now. So kind of with that, I'll turn it over to Dave to go through, some of the minor changes throughout the corridor.
Okay, and we'll go fairly quick, knowing that at the last meeting we went through in a little bit more detail. So first focus area here, this is Barlow, Cascade, and East Allen Street. We did look at, in this case, the short and long-term solution. So the next slide shows the short-term alternative. So the main piece here is kind of taking a better utilization of that acceleration lane as you're coming off Cascade Way. And so in this case, we've revised the recommendation where previously that was just called out as a bike lane with hatched area. We've called this out. That could potentially be on-street parking if it's felt that it's needed to support the businesses in that area. We also added in at the top left, just off the slide, installing a rectangular rapid flashing beacon at the existing crosswalk. Again, in response to some comments and discussion, to have the flashers there to just make pedestrians a little more conspicuous. And then this is the long-term solution. At the left-hand side here, you can see Cascade Way. That triangle splitter island goes away in this case, which opens up all movements. To Heather's point before about getting more people to use the parking garage, I think wayfinding for sure, but allowing people to turn left off East Allen into the parking garage, I think, along with the wayfinding, I think will really help get people to the parking garage as soon as possible. And then just the comment, which is down at the bottom, it now says new green belt or parking, so that was the other.
So we did reconfigure, probably pushing the wrong button, this one? Oh, this one. We did reconfigure some of the cross-sectional elements here. We tightened up the green belt, we widened the green belt, tightened up the lanes a little bit to allow enough space here if needed to have parking similar to the short-term alternative if it's needed for the adjacent businesses. So those are the main changes to this focus area.
Does this sound in line with what we discussed?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Great. Then moving up to Spring Street intersection. First alternative, as John alluded to, is a fairly straightforward, just dropping a signal at the intersection. It does allow, if you recall, the addition of a left turn lane coming eastbound on East Allen to turn left onto East Spring Street. But the rest of the improvements are fairly in line with what's out there. This does carry a bike lane through, a buffered bike lane along the kind of the westbound direction. The other change we made here again is to put or on-street parking if there's a need. This is a little bit more off the beaten path, but if there is a need at some point for parking, that could be accommodated within that hatched area. So this is the more straightforward alternative. The more elaborate alternative here is the reconfiguration. So here's East Spring Street that comes in here. This basically realigns East Spring Street to come in. This is WAF's building right here. So realignment of East Spring Street to a signalized intersection at East Allen Street. There was a couple of kind of major caveats that go along here. Obviously, this would be crossing over some private property, so there'd have to be some pretty significant conversations with the landowners here, and then a new at-grade rail crossing of the New England Central line there, which is not a definite. So we discussed that last time, and the sense, at least that I left with, is that the alternative one was the preference, but I think that's the question to pose, how you'd like to see the final report recommendation.
So I'll put this out there, and this is for you all to agree with or not. It is my personal opinion that we should not even continue to pursue this second alternative. Like, I personally don't even want to see it in the report going forward. I don't feel like we should be spending time and effort ourselves, your organization, on something that is this far out there for our community. You know, we're talking about it's more than twice the cost, and that doesn't even count land acquisition and the attorney's fees that would be associated with all of that, or working with the railroad. The amount of effort required, not just financially, but actually like in land acquisition and working with property owners here, is very significant for something that is not going to be that far beneficial beyond the other alternative. And so I don't feel like we as a community should be working any more on this, spending more resources on it, or having it out there as a potential in the future when it's something that we probably shouldn't be considering. But I
have to agree, because if you take WAF's parking lot right out, he's gonna have, I don't wanna speak for WAF, but the worth of that commercial property won't be half if there's no parking for a deli or whatever business they want to run, a dry cleaning business, whatever. Plus the cost, I'm in agreement with the mayor. I think alternative one would be a better suited for Winooski at this time.
I agree with the endorsement, but I totally disagree with removing it from the report. I think that it's important because this one does solve an issue that alternative one does not solve, which is pedestrian access along Spring, and we do not get that under alternative one, and I think it's important to keep that vision there. If in 10 years the railroad and the private property owners show up and say, hey, we'd really like to have this reconfiguration, we can make it happen, I don't see why we would discard this planning process that's already been undergone by many residents and professionals in our community. I agree we can endorse alternative one and say that's the preferred alternative to go forth, and we already know that 10 grand is required to investigate even having a at-grade railroad crossing, so we kind of don't go anywhere unless we allocate money to do that evaluation. So I guess I don't see a reason to remove it from the report, and I agree that we should stick with alternative one because it's a cost-effective version, but I think we shouldn't lose this vision of how to connect Spring Street for pedestrians and bikes in a way that won't happen under alternative one.
Just to save you perhaps a debate as to whether or not to include or not include this in the report. It just wouldn't be something that we could not include in the report. It has to be a representation of the public process and the planning process that we went through. In order to tell the complete story, we really need to include this in the report.
Yes, that makes sense. What I'm saying is I would like to know if as a council, we want to, whatever the opposite of an endorsement is, so that this doesn't get pursued any further. To your point, Jim, I think having this vision on the record is great, but I don't want to see us continue. You know, I look back at the pool planning and Main Street revitalization in here, and we put forth these studies or ideas or planning efforts that are really above and beyond what is necessary for our community and what is feasible, frankly. And then people get attached to them and want to continue pursuing that to where like this becomes something that people have seen and they're like, this is what we always talked about doing there. Why aren't we doing it? And I don't want that to be how we go forward with this.
Just one follow-up to Jason's comment, that there's, I think, 5 alternatives that we looked at here. It's been pared down for this presentation to just show these 2, but we looked at a roundabout, we looked at making Spring Street one way in either direction, we looked at a couple of other alternatives, so all of those are articulated, so this will be kind of in that mass of alternatives. It won't just be paired as kind of this one or this one, so it'll be even more buried kind of in the alternative.
So we endorse alternative 1.
Okay, that sounds pretty unanimous.
One comment too. So on this focus area alternative, you can see Cassavant is sort of redeveloped. That is carried forward in the selected alternative as well. Just kind of off the corridor beaten path.
We can go through that. Let's get this one. And then focus area 3 carries us through what used to be a fully 4-lane section, now is a 3- and 4-lane section. Again, this is the new existing conditions. And the 2 recommendations there were not, or 2 alternatives, short and long term, were not changed based on the discussion at the last meeting. Essentially, the proposal gets down to 3 lanes, so fully removes the 4th lane through the entire section. Replacing one with 1 eastbound, 1 westbound lane, and a center 2-way left turn lane. The parking is retained here in front of the new building, and the pedestrian crossings are delineated. This one obviously is in place now. This one here gets some protection from oncoming traffic. So that's the short term. This one keeps the curb lines in place. Essentially, a striping effort that hopefully, if all ideal scenario, this gets incorporated with the V-Trans paving project, so that once the paving is done, it gets striped as shown here. And then the long term, this does include shifting curbs to get some additional landscape buffer on either side to really hone that arrival experience for people coming in off the interstate. And so again, 1 lane in each direction. We've got the center 2-way left turn lane. And then both short and long term include kind of a formalization of the shared use path along the south side, continuing all the way off up Route 15, eventually to connect into the Vermont 15 path to get you all the way into Essex. So didn't hear any changes to these, so we've kept these intact as they were presented at the last meeting. And then also at the interchange itself, no changes here. No changes from the last meeting. The major change here is to go from 2 through lanes and a single left turn lane onto the interstate to two lanes onto the interstate. This greatly improves kind of the efficiency of the operation of that intersection, and then the path connection going through. So those are the changes. I think we've got this last slide kind of summarizes the things that should you be ready to take action tonight. These are the things that would be helpful to know. So focus area 1, did we get it right with the short and the long-term alternatives? Focus area 2, it sounds like alternative 1, the signal is the preferred option. And then focus area 3, the short and long-term as presented.
So I think we clearly endorsed alternative 1 in focus area 1, right? And the changes you made, we have said that reflects the discussion.
Can I ask, sorry, one
Yeah.
clarifying question on that? So we did discuss the parking being linked to the use, so it's not just a guarantee that if your developer says you want parking that you get it. So I'm just curious in terms of a high-level planning document like this versus going down to implementation, is that reflected in the text? I'm just curious how that conversation gets recorded in the final document.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that probably ends up sort of on planning desk as well as my desk. So one thing Eric and I have sort of discussed with this is the north side of Focus Area 1 is really unlikely to see development in the near term. The south side is more likely to see development, and that's where we'd probably look at on-street parking. And Eric, correct me if I'm wrong, but we would be looking at if there is proposed retail on that first floor, is it desirable to have on-street parking there to accommodate sort of that retail first floor space? If it's office space, commercial, which I'm not sure is even allowed in that district, that probably wouldn't be a good enough reason for on-street parking. It would be those quick trips in and out, because you do have the parking garage for sort of long-term parking, office use. Currently, you do have a pretty large surface parking space just across the street from CCV. So I think that would be the trigger, is that retail space.
Okay, thanks for clarifying.
Yeah.
So focus area 2, we clearly endorse alternative 1. Do we endorse continued exploration of alternative 2? We can take a vote on this. Mike and I already said we do not. Jim, you do.
Well, what does continued exploration of alternative 2 mean? Because like I said, my understanding is continued exploration means allocating 10 grand to Ask the Railroad. That's the first step, and I thought last time and this time said we weren't going to do that. So I think the answer is no, it's just endorse alternative 1.
No.
for me. Yeah.
Okay, we do not endorse exploration of that.
Okay.
And focus area 3, we endorse both of those as is. We didn't really have any
No change.
qualms there. All right. Do you have any other questions? Is that the clarification you need?
That's perfect, yeah.
Jason, can you introduce yourself?
Sorry, I'm Jason Trest with the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission. I was the project manager for the study on our behalf. Sorry about that earlier. Just a quick clarification. So just to make sure that Focus Area 3 includes the I-89 interchange, is a subtle change, but I just want to make sure that the switch for the dual left turn lane
Right.
onto the interstate is included as part of Focus Area 3, and then improving Cassavant, however that comes to be, is also part of not Focus Area 3, but Focus Area 2, I guess it would be.
2. Yeah, I mean, it was immediately adjacent to 2, but we didn't pull it out as a defined focus area because there was only one option, one alternative presented.
But I guess I just want to know that the council supports making improvements to that area so that it's more aesthetically pleasing and inviting for people to use as a park.
And to jump on to Jason's comment, when we do have this sort of council endorsement, it helps us sort of chase grants in the future, because we can say, look, the council endorsed this, like, it gives us a better footing for those, grant requests.
I thought that was part of both alternatives, so yes, I would say certainly improving the Cassavant area would be a priority. Or should be included, I should say.
Yeah, I'm all right. I would say it's included in there.
Thanks.
That design is endorsed.
It's better to be overly clear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there questions from the public? I know we didn't deep dive this evening, but. Should we, it's an approval item, should we take a vote to, a motion to approve
What says the word?
this?
Would you like me to state it?
Yeah, can you give us some phrasing?
So a motion could be to approve Focus Area 1 as presented. Focus Area 2, the signalized intersection with the addition of the improvements to the entrance to Cassavant Park. And approval of Focus Area 3, both the 3 and 4 lane section of the street, including the the 89 interchange improvements. Jason, is that right? Okay.
So moved.
Second?
Motion by Jim, second by Amy. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Don't go too far. Don't go too far.
So next up, we have item E, just up for discussion, Main Street revitalization update and phasing. Welcome.
Hi,
Can you introduce yourself? I don't think we've met.
I've been here once before. I'm Evan Dietrich with VHB.
Thank you.
So, I'll kind of lead this off, but we wanted to give you sort of a progress update for the Main Street project and start some discussion on project scoping as we sort of get into budget in the next couple of months. So we don't necessarily need any sort of hard answers at this point, but we want to go through sort of the latest progress design to make sure that everyone's sort of comfortable as we're finalizing this 60% set that we're going through, so that when we present it back to you in, say, December, we know we're on the right track and we can have a discussion about sort of financing and sort of next steps for next season. So what we're looking at is sort of the progress updates, what we've been up to since our last sort of check-in meeting, what our proposed design schedule is, and then Evan will go through sort of the progress set to date. And then I'll kind of talk through potential construction scope for next season or beyond, and then sort of what the financial impacts look like right now. I won't read through all this, but as far as project updates go, we've been doing a lot of sort of field work, just prepping for the 60% design, so additional topo surveys. You've probably seen some boring rigs out on Main Street looking at environmental concerns. We've been coordinating with our private utility partners to more on the underground work that's happening, and kind of coordinating with the other capital projects in the vicinity. So we've got the Winooski School District with their capital program, VTrans, the DDI project, just making sure that their plans, our plans sort of mesh, and we're coordinating on schedule. Other things that we're starting to think about and work on is sort of a communication plan for residents. So we have to get into all the basements for houses along Main Street to do measurements on sewers and water depths. So we're trying to, put together a list of contacts so that when we give project information and updates, we sort of have a list that we use this pretty effectively on the Haycock Street project, so that we can get, good coordination between residents and they know what's happening out there. And then as far as design schedule, so right now we're looking to receive the 60% design documents late this month. 60% is roughly like, I'd say mid-design. Next phase would be sort of moving into construction documents. So those would be the documents that, say, contractors would start looking at for pricing and bidding. We'd finalize those documents probably early December. And sort of in that December timeframe, we would also be coming back to the council to look through those designs and look at updated cost estimate and look at potential phasing or project scope for construction. We also have, luckily we've got some funding partners with this project, so we've got to meet with those folks and make sure they're satisfied with the plans and it meets their requirements. So we factored in some time in December to meet with DEC, the Clean Water Drinking Water folks. And then once we meet with council and the different agencies, we'd be moving into sort of final design plans once we had discussion on sort of what the next steps for construction would look like. The progress, this kind of enters into the progress design overview. So as you probably know, this this work started in 2014 and really sort of continued into 2018, and we've done a lot of the sort of outlining the corridor between the different modes of transportation with through community engagement and through the planning commissions. So a lot of that is sort of set. So we just want to make sure with the council that again, the work that sort of the surface transportation work is what you're expecting to see, because a lot of the design work we're doing now is sort of underground, which you probably don't really care too much about, like pipe sizes and conduit sizes. So we want to make sure the surface is correct. So we're putting manholes in the correct location, and that's being coordinated properly. So I think with that, I'll turn it over to Evan to kind of walk you through sort of the progress set.
Sure, so we're developing the 60% plans and cost estimates now. We will have those done. We expect to turn them in just before Thanksgiving, so through the rest of this month. They're based largely on the 30% plans, which have been around since early 2018. Not really too much has changed. We're just developing some additional detail at this point. We've gone back and we've taken a closer look at some of the curb lines at the turning at the intersections to make sure we have the right turning radii for the trucks and the fire trucks. So we kind of went back and double checked those things. Did some very modest modifications there at some of the intersections. We're working with the utility providers to figure out how many conduits and what size they want and where they go in the road, and we're trying to lay all of that out around all of the existing stuff that's in the road. So the utility routings are continuing. We know that the Winooski schools are beginning plans to redevelop some of their site, so we're coordinating with them and trying to figure out what we should do, if anything, at their driveways. The intersection with Teigen and their two driveways is unusual, so we're wondering, should we change that, and are there any improvements there that we should be making as part of this project, since it's part of Main Street. So we have a couple of options we're going to talk to DPW about here in the next week or two, a couple of options of what we might want to do with the driveways at the school. So those discussions are ongoing. We're doing some very small modifications to some of the bump outs and the bus stop locations, so just some final design kind of tweaking. And then some of the sidewalk buffers too. We're looking at narrowing those to avoid some existing walls and trying to preserve things out there and not make this any more of a project than it already is. So that is unfolding at this time. These are the roadway typical sections, and this is admittedly very engineering-like, but what this basically shows are two different configurations. With the project, we wanted to have a travel lane northbound, a travel lane southbound, and then also provide parking where we could, and also a bike lane northbound, because that's the uphill direction. So as we went through the development of the concepts, we said, well, bicyclists can go okay downhill along with traffic, but going uphill, they really should have a separate bike lane because they're going to be going much slower. So that's where we ended up in the conceptual design, and then that's what we're using for the basis of the final design. So these typical sections show, if I have a pointer, I think the top one. So this is looking north, so we always have the bike lane on the right side, and then that's buffered, so there's a buffer to keep traffic away from the bike lane. In some cases, we have parallel parking on the east side of the road, so that'll be next to the northbound travel lane, and then the southbound travel lane will be next to the curb. On the other hand, sometimes we have the bike lane and a buffer, and then the northbound travel lane with no parking on that side, but instead the parking is on the southbound side. And that kind of switches back and forth as we go down the road. So we basically end up with parking on one side of the road or the other, but not on both sides like is available today. So it does change that. That's probably the most significant change with the roadway, besides bringing in the width a little bit as well. So the roadway itself will be a little bit more narrow. We're switching up the parking a bit and then adding this uphill bike lane. That's the general configuration of what we're doing. And that's been the plan ever since the alternatives were approved almost 2 years ago now.
So one other comment on this too is, as we've done some more in-depth coordination with the utility providers, more than likely some of those duct banks are going to grow in size due to needs, and we probably will be looking to shift those under the sidewalk. So, you know, as we're looking at sort of construction, like this whole corridor is going to be excavated. So originally we were thinking potentially we could look at doing sort of the water resources deep work as one phased option, but as we're seeing sort of this duct bank work and some of this excavation work, it doesn't look like it's going to make sense, because we're going to be basically ripping up the entire right of way from sort of right of way building line to building line. One other thing that Evan was talking about, so where the current configuration out there now is we've got roughly curb to curb width is 45 to 50 feet approximately. So this proposed curb to curb dimension is 40 feet. So we're bringing in those curb lines, say approximately 3 feet on each side. So we're doing a little bit of a road diagram.
So this is kind of a more artist rendering of what we have. On this side, you can see the green with the arrow. That's the bike lane. The striping is the buffer to separate the parking from the bike lane. And then you have the northbound travel, southbound travel over on this side. And then on this other side, this is where we have the southbound lane, has the parking on that side, southbound travel, northbound travel, then your buffer and your bike lane. So these are the two basic overhead views of what the roadway configuration is going to look like. And this switches from side to side as we go up the road. We do have some overhead plans in the next couple of slides that show the layout of the road with the bump outs and the crosswalks. And I'll go through these quickly, but certainly interrupt me if you have questions about anything. This is the New England Central right-of-way all the way down at the south end here. So this is where our project starts. And then we head north here. So you can see we immediately introduce the bike lane with the buffer, northbound travel, southbound travel, and then southbound parking. And then we proceed north from there. At some of the intersections, this is Spring Street, so we have a dedicated turn lane for the left turners. Same with the southbound direction. So we lose the parking on both sides in this case in order to get in the left turn lanes. This doesn't happen very often though. It's really just, I think, this may be the only intersection where we have opposing left turn lanes. So this is a typical bus stop here. So we have a bunch of bus stops out there. So we kind of mark those areas out with different pavement markings. And then we're going to switch out the traffic signals at Spring Street. These represent new mast arms. So there'll be new mast arms instead of span wires out there. These are the kind of improvements that are being made as part of the project. Yep, this is a pretty heavy landscaping block between Spring and the blocks to the north. There's a lot of heavy landscaping. You can see here mid-block crossing, the introduction of the left turn lane. We keep the bike lane going northbound the whole way. And then this just continues much along the length of the road. You can see the parking is shifting from side to side. We have crosswalks at the intersections generally and bump outs at select locations, kind of check people's speed and give pedestrians more of a place to walk. And that continues, not much of a change here. You can see we have the shared lane markings in the southbound, so the bicycles will be able to occupy the southbound travel lane along with motor vehicles. Nice bump out there, kind of shortens the crossing, gives people a chance to get out into the street and be seen before they make a crossing, a busy crossing.
Yeah, so one thing with this project, we're adding quite a few crosswalks. You'll see it through the corridor now. There's really only crosswalks at the main intersections like Spring Street and LaFountain and up by the school. So pretty much every street that's intersecting Main Street now will have a crosswalk. And we'll be looking at do we need to install RFBs, the high vis flashers for each of these sort of crosswalks. So it'll be a pretty significant pedestrian improvement.
So now we're up at Teigen. We have these back-to-back turn lanes here for people turning in Norman Street. And then opposing is Teigen. Here are the two school driveways I talked about. You can see how offset the intersections are now. People who want to go straight through to Teigen actually are on this right side of this lane come out. So it's really quite a jog here at the intersection. People wanting to go northbound come out here and they make a right, but they're subject to a traffic signal that's here. There's no right turn on red. This all seems to be kind of a bit unusual layout, so we're taking a look at this and seeing if something else makes sense here. And then we're at the Colchester Town line. This is where the V-Trans project for the diverging diamond interchange will end, right here at the town line. So we've been coordinating with them to make sure, we had them update their plans actually to add these bike lanes, so they're gonna have bike accommodation on the street up here as well, which they didn't have before. They're gonna paint an island in here to match our raised island. So we're coordinating with them on the plan.
I see a downhill bike lane in this shot.
Yeah, that's just to Tigan Street. And then that ends where we have the room to do it here. And then you can see that it ends, and now you're on share the street. One of the reasons I think this came up is because Tigan and then Weaver was one of the city's designated bike routes.
In the transportation master.
In the transportation master plan, thank you. So it kind of went with that, and also we had the room up there to work with to add a separate lane where we could.
So the entire corridor, as you probably know, includes utility undergrounding, so all the aerial poles would be undergrounded. Right now we're looking at, with the exception of probably this school lot, where on the south side there's utility poles. Because, you know, form-based code development-wise, we're not likely to see any buildings right on the property line, which is sort of triggering this requirement for undergrounding to accommodate some of those building frontages. We'll likely, to save some costs, keep utility poles aerial here until we get to sort of the entrance area here. The old gas station that's been demolished, within that vicinity, that's probably where we would start the utility undergrounding work, doing the conduit work. So that's a really high-level overview of what's going on the surface. Obviously, there's a lot going on underground with all new utilities, all new water, all new sewer, all new electrical and gas conduit. You guys, any questions on this so far? You'll have another crack at this in December when we sort of provide the 60% drawings. But really, to capture any sort of, you know, major concerns or things that we can accommodate in this finalization of 60% set would be helpful.
Did you look at all at the intersection of La Fountain and Stevens Street and any proposed fix there? It's kind of a funky intersection where people often are turning left out of Stevens to go northbound, and then people going southbound are also trying to turn left onto La Fountain, and often they almost hit each other. So just curious about that.
Was there a signal warrant for that? It did not meet signal warrants. In a 20-year projection, it's kind of marginally meets signal warrants. Eventually, it could be signalized. It doesn't really meet warrants for a couple of years from now when we would do for a design year. We did look at a mini roundabout there, and we quickly realized that just about whatever improvement we were to make, you would end up taking this property on the corner if you wanted to like better align the two streets, that sort of thing. And it was thought that it was too much to chew off with this project when there weren't really serious crash history or some other problem we were really trying to solve. It's not ideal, but it's not really problematic either.
And then we looked at, as part of the Main Street study a couple of years ago, we looked at sight lines here. They're not they're substandard sight lines because of the grade on either side. And so I think there may be an opportunity to improve the sight lines coming out of La Fountain at least, which will help people not have to dart out into traffic. And we won't address the jog, but it'll help a little bit with safety.
I was wondering if you've done any assessment of like distance to crosswalk with the parking as you've staggered it. So thinking about someone parking on one side, accessing businesses on the other, or resources on the other. I'm just curious I've kind of been visually trying to keep track of it, but just an assessment of like how often those crosswalks occur and if it would basically serve businesses across the street if someone has to get to a crosswalk first before crossing the street from an on-street parking spot. It's kind of an out of left field question. I'm just curious if you've looked at it.
I don't know that we've really taken a specific look at where people might be crossing to get from businesses to the parking. Generally, the crosswalks are at the intersections, which aren't too far apart. We do have 1 or 2 mid-block crossings as well.
I think that was my question, because I know that some of those street crossings can be pretty far distances, like the fountain to...
Yeah, it's tough to balance, you know. You'd like to have them everywhere so people can cross the street and crosswalk, right? But then you have so many crosswalks that you don't even notice them anymore. So you have to be somewhat selective on where you're putting them. I think we certainly could take a look at if there are any particular locations that we should maybe be considering additional to better serve businesses or future developments and pair that up with the parking. When we were developing the conceptual plans, we did look at what side should the parking be on versus the other, knowing we were going to be eliminating some of the parking. What side of the road did it make sense to have the parking on? And we tried to provide a balance throughout the 4,000 linear feet of providing parking, a fair amount of parking on both sides.
Yeah, and one other example, so this is sort of our storefront zoning districts where we have this more brick paver feel where we expect more sort of pedestrian foot traffic. So based on zoning and what future development may come, you know, this is we figured this was an opportune spot to have a mid-block crossing so that if you do have, you know, the more foot traffic, you know, we probably need a mid-block crossing like in this area.
So if I can respond to and channeling Eric for a minute, so correct me if I'm not channeling you correctly. Just a reminder to the council, I think parking is going to be a very big deal in these final designs. The form-based code along Main Street does envision the buildings out to the curb and the parking behind the buildings with the idea of that community vision of density to slow down traffic and create a neighborhood and have that kind of urban streetscape perspective. So the more we as a city can work with the development community to put the parking behind the buildings and coordinate its use across parcels potentially in some kind of shared use parking structure, that's really the long-term vision for the community. So to the extent that these parcels will redevelop into new businesses that don't currently live there, it's hard to do that analysis you're suggesting. Really where we've tried to prioritize our focus is things like this that allow the businesses to kind of fall out onto the sidewalk to make a more kind of vibrant feel. Okay? Yep. Excellent.
What's the increase in the crosswalks in this design based on what we have now in terms of numbers? Is it?
I had that number in my head like 2 weeks ago. I think approximate numbers. I think there's only like 4 crosswalks total right now, and we're increasing it to 10-ish. Yeah.
So I wonder, will that have an impact on school crossings and crossing guards and people to make that happen?
Sorry, yeah, one of the big discussions we're having with the school right now is, you know, they sort of, they're one of the, I guess, how do I put this? So the crosswalks that are at the school right now, they had a lot of feedback on how those crosswalks get used. So you probably see one that's been painted over. That was from the school's input. So they have one crossing guard up there, and they're really trying to force kids to the traffic signal and get them across with the crossing guard. And they did a backpack flyers and really pushed that. So as we look at their sort of revised access, we're talking operationally with them on, you know, future crossing and what they want to see there. So I think between us and working with the school, we'll have a plan. And some of that will be driven by probably the vehicle access and proposed egress in their new sort of campus layout.
Okay.
So what I see here in this particular image is a ton of trees and pavers. And this reminds me of our downtown where we are seeing maintenance issues with the sidewalk, trees under brick pavers. I'm thinking about the discussion we recently had around budget and how we're not able to address sidewalk maintenance in a rapid fashion. Have we done any digging into what it is going to take for the city to maintain this new hardscaping and landscaping?
That is an excellent question. So I think one of the things we're thinking of operationally is it may not be pavers as you would think of downtown. It may be sort of stamped concrete pavers to basically reflect sort of, you know, okay, this is a different type of zone. This is a storefront zone. And the remainder would be sort of concrete, typical sidewalk. But this could just be a treatment on top of concrete sidewalk to give it an appearance of a paver. The other issue that really is driving a lot of the maintenance hassles we have downtown with the tree pits is we're looking at sort of the Silva-Cell underground system that provide more root space for trees, so they're not trying to sort of reach up and push sidewalks up, and especially with what you're seeing with the pavers downtown, you can kind of see the root systems underneath. So we think that will help our operation issues. Right now, we do have sort of 5-foot sidewalks all the way up the corridor. We will have wider sidewalks, but you know, and it may be a second pass with our sidewalk plow during winter operations. So we see that occurring. But you know, ultimately, I think we're trying to come up with sort of we understand we're pretty strapped operationally, so we wanted something that's going to be durable, that we can run our sidewalk plows over and easily maintain. And typically these sidewalks have, say, a 40 to 50 year life cycle. So we have to budget that within our CIP as well and make sure that, you know, we're accommodating it.
And what about the significant increase in street trees?
As far as capital, I mean,
Maintenance and capital, right? They have a surprisingly short shelf life.
yeah, I would say if we're not using sort of the Silva-Cells and the structural soil, they do have a pretty short life cycle. I would say there's also a benefit to introducing those trees to the streetscape. One of the issues that we see up Main Street now is they're planted right underneath utility poles, so they'll have that sort of Y effect. I think the utility undergrounding will give them a longer lifespan, but I think there will be an operational cost to sort of trimming trees and maintaining them.
So that's a piece of information that I would want to see when we get to financial decisions.
Okay.
I feel like with this project, unlike other projects we have looked at, we have never had a chance to like deep dive what is included in here and talk about the long-term impacts. And when we got the pool project, we got feedback from engineers that we could value engineer some things out because they had no impact, like surfaces that had no impact on long-term sustainability or maintenance costs.
Right.
And we've never had an opportunity to do that with this project. That is something I would like us to see before we make a decision about any phasing or expenditures.
Yeah, our goal with doing these 60% plans is to show everything that the city really desired to have with the conceptual plans. We fully expect that certain parts may be dialed back based on discussions with you folks and funding availability. Some of these things may need to drop out of the mix, but we wanted to give the full cost with the 60% plans so everyone understood this is what we're talking about doing and this is what it's going to cost.
Yeah, and I think it makes sense, like we did with the pool, basically give you an a la carte of options that could drop off and sort of what that means for the project.
Because we haven't gotten there yet, but like if we do not get significant funding, like the build grant or other things we're applying for, doing this full bore is, in my opinion, out of reach for our community's budget.
So we can, if you want, we can jump into financials.
Any other questions about the contents? Any public questions? Heather?
I would just say, in weighing what the value is of trees and stamped concrete and stuff like that, you should also be looking at what the economic impact is of those in terms of businesses that it brings in terms of people who will come to a place like that as opposed to a place that doesn't have those amenities. So there are two sides to looking at that value. It doesn't mean that we should have that many trees, but I think there's a full spectrum of things you have to look at in understanding what the economic impact is.
And just to build off that, I wonder, will this accommodate options like benches where people can sit and congregate and, I don't know.
That'd be down the road.
Yeah, but I'm just curious if that would be, because I think if we want to attract people and have people hang out versus
Yeah, so
go through.
within, it's so small, but sort of in that tree belt zone, that's where you would see sort of those benches and, updated street lights and, those streetscape amenities. So we do have currently within the estimate, those items are sort of in there.
Okay.
So any more design-ish questions?
Is there any part of the streetscaping that we can possibly do at a later date, or does it really, from a logistics sense, make sense to do it when we're tearing up the main road?
Do you guys have an opinion on that one?
You can always add things behind the curbs at a later date, but it will be more economical to do it all at once, obviously. But if you don't do anything behind the curb for streetscape, you could have the opportunity to come back later, switch out the sidewalks, switch out or add light poles, benches, and all of that could be added at a later time. You would have to build something for sidewalks, right? So that means that you're coming back and likely ripping that out or adding to it. May not be the best in the end, but you could phase it like that.
The bump outs, you said you modified the bump outs?
Yeah, a little bit.
Is that gonna be accommodating to buses into commercial traffic such as 18-wheelers and bigger trucks?
Yes.
Because we've seen a problem in our Burlington where they got in some trouble with those bump outs. So there are businesses along Main Street that there's 18-wheelers constantly parked, even on the side streets, such as Bellevue Street, and you have a bump out right there on Bellevue. So you're saying that those trucks, even a garbage truck, will safely be able to navigate that bump out without going into oncoming traffic?
Well, not necessarily without going into oncoming traffic. This really, we view this as a urban type setting, and people have to drive at slower speeds and be accommodating to other drivers. And in any downtown kind of setting, you run into a situation where you may have to wait for a truck to swing wide. It's not something we would expect to regularly happen, but it will happen from time to time. But we did look at the turning radii in all of these intersections based on the design vehicle we talked to the fire department about and talked to DPW about for the types of trucks would be on the road. And we did make some modifications to some of the curb lines this time around. Yeah.
Yeah, and for example, Taigen, obviously that's a main sort of truck route into that industrial complex. That has to be designed to accommodate, large truck movements.
I mean, there's large truck traffic on Main Street altogether coming from Spring Street, LaFountain Street, even Bellevue Street. You see them pulling into the convenience store right there, and then they back it up. But just for plow trucks, I mean, any large vehicle, I'm just curious on how that will affect oncoming traffic with the bigger trucks coming out, especially if the driver's not paying attention. Say a kid's on the sidewalk or on his bike in front of you and you're trying to pay attention to the bike, and all of a sudden this truck comes out and he's coming out on oncoming traffic. I think it makes a hazard, and I think we gotta really focus on that and make it as safe as possible on Main Street.
Yeah, we're trying to build in stuff that will make it better. One example is right here on this page, actually. We heard feedback from the fire department that they have a heck of a time backing into the bays, right, after they make a run, because people today park over here and they don't have the room to do that. So we've now changed this to the design here to eliminate the parking right here and have all this striping so that trucks have better room to move in and out.
You know, Jim, I forgot the Tree America. What's the tree thing?
Tree City USA.
Does that offer any grant money for landscape trees for this type of project?
Would you think? There's a small grant program that has been offered in Vermont for communities in the state that have Tree City USA status. There's 6 of them that are eligible. So it's like Rutland, Burlington, and you have to look for the others. So that is available, but something on this scale, I mean, really would have to be an institutional investment. And I feel obligated to follow up on what Heather said, and we forgo property tax valuation if we take out the trees. Trees have a proven benefit to increase property taxes. We face stormwater infiltration, runoff, interception problems if we remove all the silva-cells along here and turn it into hardscape. So I think there's some real benefits for the infrastructure that we're actually going to be paying for on Main Street from that. We'll grow our grand list more if the trees are there, and their 30-year investment in energy savings and climate change are going to be important for the businesses and residents who live along there, who can pay lower AC bills because the summers are warmer and warmer. If we wait 10, 15, 20 years to plant those trees, we don't get those benefits for a while. So I think that we got to be thinking now about increasing our canopy and maintaining what we've already got. And the trees along Main Street are not in the greatest shape because they're in a green strip that's this big.
Yep.
And I think we can do better. But so to answer your question, I think the scale of money that we're required to plant along here isn't matched by the grants that I'm aware of for Tree City USA cities.
I'm thinking more of the maintenance for them too.
There are other options at the state level for some of the maintenance work too. So
Okay.
Structural pruning and hazard mitigation. There's other options out there, I think, for some of those.
So that's something we're
John's
looking
probably
into
more aware
too.
of than I am. So.
Yeah, and I will say, so the actual tree sort of, purchasing and planting is a pretty small amount versus sort of the hardscape costs that are part of this project. So the operational piece would be probably more beneficial to us, because that's where I can see more of the costs, like the,
Well, the whole purpose of this is to
longevity
make it
cost.
prettier looking, so the trees are gonna make it prettier looking. And that's a big thing, I think, for people that are gonna see their tax dollars go. They're not gonna see the major repairs. I mean,
Yeah, all the the stuff that we
Yeah.
deal with daily is underground. You don't see
underground,
it.
they're gonna forget about it, or if someone new comes here, they're not gonna remember the poles all the way down, all the wires going across, but they will notice the trees.
So I guess with that, I can kind of jump into sort of the financials, just some, updated modeling. So just to sort of reiterate what our strategies, values have been so far with looking at funding the debt. Some of the values we've kind of looked at is, sort of obviously the strong outreach to impact the community members, trying to coordinate any of these improvements with adjacent property development and capital projects. And then the financial piece is, looking at other alternatives for revenue. So, tapping the local options tax is sort of a revenue source for the project. Looking at what the projected Main Street grand list growth would be as an offset earmarked this project. And trying to structure the general fund debt towards that tax increment finance district debt expiration, which is FY25. And then, of course, looking at grants, which we've been, very successful with so far. I didn't outline one of the things we've been up to is, obviously we've gotten some additional grant funding, the $450,000 and the $400,000 with the Northern Borders Regional Commission and the V-Trans Ped and Bike, which thank you, Heather, for working on that. And then looking at potential impact fees, which you're going to see soon, transportational impact fees, potentially looking at utility undergrounding impact fees. So I would say one of the main drivers that we've looked at as we've looked at financing is trying to structure debt towards that TIF expiration, the general fund debt. Again, we're not answering these questions tonight, but just something that we're thinking about as we get into final design is, how can we start this project soon, sort of meet our grant funding deadlines, and try to limit disruption to our sort of community members along the corridor. So one option we're looking at is, utilizing that local option tax revenue and sort of the Main Street increase grand list growth. We can accommodate sort of a phase 1 project starting next summer, say to Bellevue Street, which is 1,200 linear feet of the, almost 3/4 of a mile of the project, so about a third of the project scope. There's pros and cons. So pro would be that we're coordinating with the adjacent capital projects that are going on, the VTrans project and the school district project. Those schedules align pretty well. Obviously we can look at starting work next summer, and the debt modeling that we've done to date supports sort of this phased project scope. It also allows us to kind of look for additional grant funding instead of, say, doing a full project. So it shows potential grant funders that, hey, we're serious, we're starting work, and lets us look at other general fund options for grants. There is, downsides to it in that there is potentially increased cost because we're basically creating, multiple bid documents. So contractors demob, remob, there's additional fees there. There is potential for extension of, say, a season of construction because, it's not, we're just doing the deep water main work and sewer work. We're kind of doing one phase, stopping, doing restitution for the top transportation pieces, and then starting another project. So there's some sort of, lost economies of scale there. And then, we've got to tie in potentially new utilities with existing utilities, so that can be challenging. So this is an option we're looking at. This is sort of the funding of what that would look like. So again, we don't have to get in the weeds tonight, but I just want to start sort of getting you prepared for this. I've given up above shows the sort of full general fund project costs, the 13.9 million. Below that is sort of the grants that we have received to date, the 1.1 million, VTrans federal grant, the Northern Borders grant, the VTrans bike pen grant. We also have submitted for a build grant, which that could wipe all this away and we'll just do the whole project maybe, so we'll see. And then, you can kind of see below that, remaining is about 12.8 million, and we've taken out debt for 1.7 million. Oh, sorry, that's the utility work. The existing engineering is 1 million, so we have roughly about $10 million worth of debt to do the full project on the general fund side. That's a huge amount to take out in one shot. That's about $600,000 in annual debt over a 30-year term. So that's not feasible for us to do in one shot without some additional grant funding or other revenue support. On the other side, it shows what a potential phase project would look like. So if we did do sort of a phase 1, say starting next year, that's roughly a $2.4 million project. There's different debt because there might be a commercial loan tied in there because some of that utility work would not be owned by us. It would partially be paid for by a private utility and partially paid for by us. So that's a different sort of, that's a 10-year loan versus our typical, say, 30-year loan. And then assuming like a phase 2 project would be the rest of the scope, that would be the remainder 7.7 million. So breaking that down into sort of a debt service sheet, again, this is a little hard to see, but first row is the engineering debt we've already taken out. That's actual. And then 2 phase 1 rows. First one would be a typical bond bank loan for that $2 million-ish project. And then the second row would be the commercial debt for the private utility work. And then the 2 rows below that would be the remaining phase 2 work, which really we're trying to align it to that FY25 TIF revenue that comes in at roughly right now we're saying we're utilizing 50% of that revenue based on previous council discussions to help pay for the project. So that ends up being almost $600,000 in FY26 when we're using the whole 50%. And then, of course, the local option tax revenue would basically offset the initial phase one work, which, I mean, we don't have actual numbers as of yet. These are conservative projected numbers. So, you know, and a portion of that is actually paying for the pool as well. So one thing I should know, previously we were showing the pool and Main Street as sort of one big project. We've pulled out the pool and now it's fully within our capital project now that we have known costs. So now this is just Main Street and looking at how we pay for that project. And then below that, you can kind of see we're looking at other revenue sources, Main Street grand list growth potential, and, you know, future development fees, which we'll be looking at down the road. So with this, you know, we're basically looking at a project that we can, you know, right now move forward with. We're not looking at any property tax increases to support the project because we're looking at using local options tax. We would look at creating sort of a earmarked capital reserve fund to sort of smooth out the debt, which you can kind of see in the bottom blue row. So there'll be some years, FY23, FY24, where we kind of go negative, but this earmarked capital reserve fund would basically support that. This is a lot of numbers, and again, I don't expect you need to totally get into this tonight because we will have updated numbers in December, and I think we're gonna, you know, we'll be presenting a more detailed breakout of all this, but just wanted to give you an idea of kind of what we're thinking right now and sort of get any feedback from you on this.
And if I could refer that just a
please.
little bit. So, you know, one of the challenges of being an elected official, especially on bodies like this that turn over, is that you are inheriting decisions that have previously been made. Mm-hmm. So what we are trying to present here is how we have interpreted past council's guidance and decisions from a values perspective. So what we have heard in the past is that there is interest in the full project but concern about affordability, and that there is interest in doing the full project but limiting any tax rate increase as a result of this project. So this is holding those two values at the same time, this is an option that gets us there. You as a new council can certainly give us new value statements about what you would like to see move forward. You know, a smaller project, a project where we do this all at once and minimize the impact to our residents of, you know, many years of construction. There are other kind of value statements that you could give us as direction, but this is really, I want to take some of the pressure off John here. This isn't what John thinks should happen. This is what we're trying to put forward, responding to past council's direction, and make sure and check in with you all to say, are we still on the right track, or are there realignment of expectations that we should take into consideration now before we finalize 60% design? Because while we don't need your final feedback on that tonight, the more we move forward with engineering, we are locking into place where, you know, where water lines are going, where utilities are going, where things are going. So if we need to go back and significantly readjust, that's double paying for engineering, if that makes sense.
What about the new buildings that are gonna be popping up on Main Street? I know there's one big project coming up by West Spring Street. How are you preparing for that to correlate with this?
So one thing why we selected sort of the northern section of the project to start was because there's, you know, besides the school project, we don't see a lot of development potential there. And it gives those other projects that are kind of right in smack in the middle of the corridor some time to develop their plans so that we can coordinate with what they're proposing. I mean, ideally, they line up at the same time and we kind of, you know, we do our work when our work on the other side of the right-of-way line when they do their work. But I know, you know, ultimately there will be projects down the road that will happen potentially after if we do improvements along the whole corridor. And we just have to plan, try to get as much information from the developer as possible. Like, where do you expect utility stubs? So we can bury those stubs now so that they're not ripping up the road
Exactly,
afterwards.
making double work.
Yeah, I mean, so that, we've had, working with Eric, we have a general sense of where we think development's gonna occur in the near term, and we're trying to reach out to those developers to do some sort of preliminary work, so we're laying out sewer, water correctly, we're laying out conduits correctly, because ultimately, yeah, we don't want to be in that road again if we're paving it.
I should say there's 1.5 projects on horizon.
Yeah. Right.
The other question I have, this has nothing to do with the money. Has anyone done a study on what the impact it's going to have on the businesses that are existing now, especially in that corridor of Colchester line to LaFountain Street? There's quite a few businesses, and there's a couple new ones. Do we have any idea how that's going to impact them?
During construction?
During construction, on parking, getting people able to get to the businesses, such as restaurants or to the pharmacy and Rite Aid. Has anyone done anything like that yet?
Until we know sort of the construction phase, so we've had one meeting with the business owners to date, and it was too soon. We're trying to get some feedback from them on sort of the project, but without sort of knowing what the construction phase would look like, I don't think we're ready to have those discussions yet.
Okay.
But once we kind of have a general idea of schedule, we're going to have a pretty robust sort of plan, working with Heather to look at how do we maintain foot traffic and businesses and, businesses open.
Disruption of power, water, I mean, there's all kinds of things that need to be in consideration for these businesses.
If I can just add to that, I've gone to every business individually to start those conversations and talk about concerns, and the concerns have been primarily parking. There are certainly other examples of communities that have done large projects like this, and so we don't need to reinvent the wheel and come up with a whole new way of doing this. There are standard best management practices that we can follow. And I think one of the strongest things that we can do is encourage our business community along Main Street to think of themselves as a community and to look at shared solutions. So as we are moving, if we're doing phased work, for example, sharing the resources that we have for parking between different businesses is one strategy that we can use. So I really think that this is going to be an ongoing conversation, and we need to make sure that we're communicating frequently, regularly throughout the process, and using all our partners at the table.
Did we learn anything from the big dig down at the Rotary? Because I just want to make sure, because there's a lot of people that I've talked to that are kind of concerned about their business, and they're small businesses. They're not Rite Aid that will survive this. But I remember during the Rotary construction, there quite a few businesses went out, like in the Champlain Mill. A lot of those businesses closed, and one was a good restaurant that has come back, and we love Waterworks. Thank God they're back. But they were one of the chief businesses that closed during that construction, and this is where my head is talking about this project. Are those people? I mean, we got to make sure the city does everything possible to make sure those businesses keep up and running, in my opinion.
So I think, just to underline a point Heather just made, I think there are a number of examples, our downtown reconstruction being one of them. I think also looking at, when we built District Heat in Montpelier, Barry's Big Dig, you see some of them in Burlington as well. There are, and I'm glad Meredith is here too, there are a lot of tools that business communities supported by the city and nonprofits can use to send out the message that we're open for business, that there are, special promotions, that there are efforts connected to the construction. I think Heather and I and Meredith and others are learning from our community partners about how you do that well, supported by a city, to ensure that small businesses stay open. I do think that one of the things that will hurt the businesses is if we have, lots of conversations for years about construction happening without set plans. I think, to John's point, the first meeting we had was too soon. They were looking for specifics about what is happening when. And I think as I'm not saying we need to get there tonight, but I think if we can get there in the next year, so we have a very intentional plan, so the business community knows what that plan is, and we are supporting through promotions and advertising and getting the words out, and a shop local campaign and all of those things that our partners have done. It will be hard, but I think that's how we make it the least hard for our business
I
community.
think that's great. I think that's how you get the community, I think that's how you get them to work together as well. So,
Right.
Okay.
Pivoting back to cost, considering the added debt service on the water and sewer fund, I would like to know if we have a sense of any upcoming capital improvements or debt service related to like the MS4 permit, phosphorus controls. Do we anticipate needing additional upgrades at the water treatment plant? Is there anything on your radar there?
So, great segue. So, as sort of an overview for the water and sewer fund as well, we do have a fairly substantial USDA grant that's supporting the water and sewer fund portion of the project. So, water project 2.2 million, 47%-ish is covered by USDA grants. But that's still a $54,000 annual debt out of the water fund. So there, as far as our water fund goes, we really, the only assets we have are our water mains. So this water main on Main Street is 100 years old. We've had breaks along this section, and it's obviously created some disruptions for businesses as well when we have those sort of unexpected breaks. So there's most of the water mains within the city are unfortunately about 100 years old. So, we will be planning sort of the next round of next section of water main work that will have to fit in with this added debt. But we're being pretty substantially subsidized thanks to USDA. So, we don't expect with the water fund, this is helping us sort of with our goal of replacing these water lines and getting our distribution system more up to date.
Will this help pay for disruption when you're actually doing the construction and another water main breaks, just like the one by Rite Aid during the paving?
Unfortunately, well, unless we have the same contractor doing it, maybe.
Okay.
But no, unfortunately,
okay.
it wouldn't. It would just be for the bid construction dock replacement
Yeah,
work.
okay.
Unfortunately, the sewer fund is probably know as sanitary and stormwater. So, sewer fund, we have more assets. We have a treatment plant, and we've done a lot of improvements to the treatment plant within the last couple of years with our new headworks facility. You mentioned the phosphorus regulations coming out. So as of right now, the testing that we've done at the plant is with some, minimal chemical dosage, we were able to meet our phosphorus limit. Not to say if the projected permit, which we haven't received yet, for phosphorus limits goes down, that would potentially trigger a capital project for us because our current treatment plant could not accommodate the phosphorus removal limits with our current equipment. So that would mean another, tertiary treatment system that we would have to look at funding. But right now, we do not see that as an item that we need to budget for or plan for because we're proposing to meet that limit with just basically operations and some additional chemical feed. So sewer fund also pays for our distribution network. So, and typically what we would do is anytime we're doing a water replacement, which is sort of the higher priority, we would look at the storm and sanitary sewer system within that corridor. We've been pretty successful with slip lining, and usually that's done with when developers come in, they pay an allocation fee. So we've been using that funding to sort of do that slip lining work. So I guess the long way of saying there's no additional sort of projected big ticket items for the sewer fund besides additional distribution work. And same thing with Main Street. This is roughly 100-year-old pipe that's beyond its useful life. So we're taking advantage of the USDA grant subsidy to replace this stuff. But it's a pretty significant annual added debt to our sewer fund at $193,000, even with USDA grant. So, we will be looking for additional grant funding, but it's work that unfortunately needs to be done regardless. But it is a little bit more straightforward in that we can build this sort of just within our capital program. We started last year sort of building this in, and it works. It does require that we are looking at, as we mentioned last year, a 2 or 3% rate increase every year on both funds. And some of that is due to the fact that we haven't done those rate increases in past years to keep up with sort of our capital improvements that we need to do. So some of it's catching up, and some of it is just helping support this capital project.
So I would just share as an additional piece of feedback, we have talked about phasing this project since I joined the council. I don't know what happened before that for sure. It is disappointing for me to hear that the utility ducts are moving and that we are no longer able to consider a focus on utilities without having to touch the hardscaping and landscaping before receiving additional funds. That said, I agree with the approach to start at the top. I feel like as a resident, there's already going to be significant disruption up there, so this doesn't feel like as much of an added blow. And starting with that shorter section is a chance to sort of see what this looks like before, maybe before committing to the rest. I don't know how that will work out with timing, but so my feedback would be positive on that phasing approach now that we are in a position where we lack other phased approaches.
I agree, and I think to your point, John, about that section having 100-year-old infrastructure and the water main breaks that we've had, it just makes sense to me to start there.
That reminds me too, to the point that you surfaced earlier, Mike, with development projected on the lower parts of Main Street. That's a conversation we've had before too that I don't think we've ever fully fleshed out, but like, could we potentially coordinate some of this work with development so as not to be, double doing essentially what's happening on the sidewalk?
Yeah, that's always the goal. I know for development that was potentially going to occur on the bottom ends of the corridor, we basically provided our concept plans at that time and said, here's what full build out looks like and they were looking to accommodate that full build out of the streetscape, and there's pretty minimal undergrounding work, so that was sort of part of their project. So anytime we can try to partner with the developer to do that work, and the worst thing that could happen is somebody builds something and we tear it up like a year later. Right. That's obviously not where we want to be.
What about the other project? Like the one on between LaFountain and Spring Street by Yankee Plumbing?
Yes.
You guys coordinated with that developer?
We are. So with those kind of projects, we'll see where it lands construction-wise. So, if we can accommodate them with our proposed improvements, we'll basically look at having them do sort of the minimal putting back. So if we can do a lesser expensive concrete sidewalk, or put the concrete sidewalk more in line where our new concrete sidewalk is and build off it, we'll try to do that. So again, we don't want to rip up new sidewalk that's being installed. That's not our goal.
Has there been any ground studies done yet, or have you, since you've been digging it up Main Street for the water mains, have we done any sampling of any possible pollutants? That's
many.
Okay.
Yeah, so even, I don't know how many borings were done. We just did a round of borings a couple weeks ago to better define some PCB contamination. So we've done soil investigation throughout the corridor, And we know roughly where there's certain contaminants. We've done a pretty robust environmental study, and that's actually required as part of a lot of the funding
Right.
that we're pursuing.
So is that kind of in the budget of things on this project, or is
So
it?
within the estimates that you've seen, that's all within the budget estimates. Yep.
Can I ask just a little bit of historical information on the phasing, the idea of approaching this in thirds, or at least a 1/3, 2/3 split, is really to align the expenditures with the options tax and the general fund grant growth and then the TIF expiration. So 1/3 is basically how much you can do without raising property taxes, yeah?
Correct.
And then has there been what's the friction? What are we losing to friction by having a start-stop? Like, is there an estimate? I know you said you can't quantify parts of it, but do you have a sense of like, we're giving up, $100,000, $500,000? I mean, what is the kind of range that you think we're gonna?
Unfortunately, I don't have a good sense for that. I mean, hopefully we can try to define that better in construction documents, because a lot of it does depend on sort of just the bidding, the nature of bidding out there. So you could get a local contractor that's, a larger local contractor that's really hungry and, will get a good price, and then, potentially they could continue on down the project and bid on the next phase and maybe not miss a beat. Or it could be, a bad bidding year and you have a lot of contractors that are already full up of work, and so it's difficult to say until we sort of get to the construction document phase and get a better feel. But yeah, I can't get a number on that.
And then for the number of years you need to complete Bellevue to North Main, is that how many years?
So, kind of running through the schedule we did, we're proposing, say if we did the north end to say Bellevue, we would do sort of all the utility undergrounding, potentially one construction season starting next year, and then the next season we would do sort of the top, sidewalks and the streetscape work.
Okay.
The following year after that, we could potentially start with phase 2, which would be sort of the utility undergrounding work. And that could take maybe 2 seasons, 2 years of just doing utility work down the corridor. And then sort of the surface work would happen concurrently, but mainly like, the following year after the start of the heavy underground work.
You're kind of chasing the undergrounding by a year.
Yeah.
Okay.
You may have already said this, John. Because cost of material doesn't ever go down. And if you're talking from start to finish, 7 years, have we considered that bump up in the budget? I don't know if you said that yet or not.
Yeah, so the original estimates don't really consider that,
Okay.
but when we get to the next round of estimating, that'll have to be considered, sort of the escalation and material costs.
Any questions from the public? One more random thought. Thinking about business outreach, what I've seen tonight, I feel like what we communicated to, like, publicly into businesses is this, like, rotated parking, so the sense is like 50% less parking. What I've seen here is an even larger decrease than that, so that might be worth more outreach on.
I think when we have final plans.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Is there more specific feedback that you would like from us?
No, I think we're good. I think for us, we just wanted to get a sense, that the current concept designs are still going in the right direction, and just give you sort of a primer on what's coming, especially coming into budget.
Are we good with the decrease of parking though?
I think we can talk about that, like we
Later.
discussed having a deeper dive into the design and what's included in the future. I think that would be a time to dig into that.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's under sort of next steps, as I mentioned. December, we'll be looking to present the 60% documents, and that's, I think, when you'd get in sort of the deeper dive with those kind of discussion points.
How will that meeting align to the build grant announcement?
So the projected build grant is November 14th, so we may know next week. It's a long shot. Don't get your hopes
Yes,
up.
I
It's, but it's out there.
I guess we can close out this discussion item then. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the whole team joining. I'm gonna call a 2-minute recess, actually. We will reconvene at 8:11. That's what it All right, we shall reconvene our meeting. We are on item F, introduction of a public records request policy with Eric.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm here tonight to introduce to you a draft of a public records request policy, specifically titled the Public Records Inspection, Copying, and Transmission Policy. One of the primary things I want to draw your attention to is in the cover sheet for this item in the agenda. Under the expenditure required section, it lists none. This will cost nothing. So,
thank you.
Just
So just approved.
just you know. So this is as I mentioned, this is a draft policy to address how the city responds to requests for public records. Right now, state statute identifies a process and information related to specific requests for public records. However, we don't have anything specifically locally that helps staff and the public figure out kind of how to navigate that process. So this is a draft policy that's based off of guidance from the Vermont League of Cities and Towns on some language to establish a policy. This has been reviewed by our staff and by our legal counsel as well and provided comments. So what you have before you is a draft that incorporates all of those comments as well. really the way this is set up is kind of as three separate pieces. The first part is kind of talks about the records that we have in the vault that are kind of the general public can come in and inspect and look at any time and copy. They're open and accessible to the public anytime. Nobody really needs to help them. Generally, folks that are coming in to do property research for sales of property, primarily full access to that. This policy would not affect those types of walk-in requests for records. The second part is kind of what is titled in here, the inspection of records. So that's when somebody wants to come in and just look at a record that may not be in the vault. A good example is any land development projects that are going on. If it's an active case, generally the file is kept in my office while it's being processed. So if somebody wants to see that record, they would have to come in and request to be able to see it. Simple enough to do. It happens quite regularly, especially when we have a case that's going before the Development Review Board. The public and the adjacent property owners get notified of that meeting, so they come in and they want to see what the project is. They request that file. It's given to them. They look at it. Then they give it back. The third piece is kind of the copying and transmission of those records. So if somebody wants to take those records with them, or take a copy of those records with them, or if somebody from outside of the city requests a record be sent to them, the policy would address those records as well, and then any fees that are associated with the transmission and the copying of those records. So it really helps to kind of clarify some of the processes and how we would treat the different types of requests for records that are being requested by city staff and the various departments. So as I mentioned, this is the initial draft, so it's really here for you tonight to provide any feedback or any comments that you might have on this policy that we can then look at and incorporate and bring you a new draft, which will also cost you nothing.
So I know we have some specific questions, but I wonder if it makes sense, and maybe this doesn't, but my first thinking is, where do we really differ here from state statute or guidelines that the state has already set forth?
So primarily we don't. Statute is pretty clear on what you can and cannot do with public records requests, how quickly you have to respond to those requests, and then there are a few kind of decision points that a community can make. For example, if a record doesn't currently exist, a community can decide whether or not they want to produce that record, or just say that doesn't exist and you don't get a record. So it's really more to kind of, instead of having to go to statute and look at what the actual statutory language is, this is a more concise policy that we can use more easily, and I think more it's more accessible to both staff and to the public.
Okay.
Sorry. So I think I kind of made this request over email looking at the formatting question. So one thing I would just say is that Vermont's pretty poor in the information access realm, as rated by kind of global and national entities. We don't do very well. We receive an F on transparency and a D+ overall for open government. Many of those things are at the state level and outside our control. So I'd love to see us take a little step further than what we can do at state statute, especially around formats and provision of data. So I'd love to see us default to providing transmissions and copies in the format that they're in. So you already have it in there that if it's in paper, it'll be provided as paper copy, and no electronic versions will be created, but the option is really up to the custodian to decide whether to transmit something that's already electronic as electronic or printout. And I would hate to see us default having the option of resorting to providing documents as printouts that were originally electronic unless there's a really good reason to do so. So that's one thing I was hoping that could be maybe addressed a little bit more, or stated a little bit more clearly about when electronic records can be converted back to paper before delivery to a requester. If there's some specific cases that we're thinking of that would need that kind of treatment, but I'd love to see us default to open electronic access to records where possible. And along those lines, they asked about fees, and thank you for providing the schedule of fees from state statute. I noticed our fees for copying are much higher than what state statute provides. So I don't know if that's something that would be potentially adjusted for record request that might be different than what the city clerk charges now. I don't know if that's something that we need to think about as a group, if we need to have a different fee structure for copying than for these types of requests that is more in line with state statute and is lower. So those are my 2 pieces of feedback on this. But I'm really glad to see the city addressing this. I think it's nice to write down what we actually think we should be doing in terms of providing our own business to the people that we represent and serve.
Is there some context for why our fees are higher?
Not any context that I could provide.
According to the state fees, we can charge $1 per page for all our land records. And you can charge up to $1, and that's what we charge.
And I think the state fee, if we didn't have any fee set, was 10 cents or 50 cents per page, I think.
I think what we may, so I'm gonna make a live assumption here, which is probably a dangerous idea. I think probably what has happened is that there's a difference between a land record production and a copy of an invoice that's a public records request. Right. And somewhere in the translation of those 2 things in the fee ordinance, we used the land record value for all production of materials.
Right.
I think that is certainly, I think we could think about doing that as a difference between kind of a certified copy of a land record, which, as the city clerk says, is authorized in statute, versus, you're copying all of our invoices to our attorney for the last 2 years, and that's just putting it through the copier.
Yeah. And as the photocopy rate is 5 cents per single-sided page and 9 cents per double-sided page. So we'd be, there's a 20-to-1 ratio for someone who's requesting a record. What they'd have to pay is kind of 20 times what state statute would require. So I do think that we can fix that. That'd be great.
In a similar vein, and I'm just asking for the background here, I'm not saying this is wrong. I am curious why we charge for staff time. If that is not part of fulfilling one's duties, is there some state statute behind that?
So my understanding of interpretation of that at the state level is that, especially for smaller communities that honestly I would put us in, if you, to be transparent and make records available, if you're spending, 4 hours of a day producing a public record, that especially for part-time folks, that then becomes those hours that you're not providing to your community as some kind of service provision. It is service provision and being transparent, but it's not furthering the expectations that you all have set for all of us. So it's a way to, so it has a twofold purpose. One, it's a way to recoup some revenue stream to a community so they can maintain a service level. And quite frankly, it can be used as a way to narrow down information request. So I will give some examples. We have gotten public records requests where it says, we want every document that refers to parking in your downtown. Well, that would probably take Angela and myself 2 weeks to comb through 20 years of past records. Whereas if we can go back to them and say, we are estimating that this is going to cost X hundreds or thousands of dollars in staff time. Can you define what you're looking for? Are you looking for all parking related issuance to my web grocer, just because we talked about them earlier? We've never gotten that request. Then we can go right to that document and know exactly what it is, and it takes us out of city service for an hour versus a week.
That makes sense.
So it has a 2-prong intent, I think.
On average, how much time do you think your staff is spending right now on records requests?
So not land records, not things that are regular course of business, people come in and get all of the time. My guess is since I've been here, we've had between 25 and 40 public records requests a year. And those range in, a request that takes a half an hour to find through an old file and email it out to somebody, and requests that have taken 3 or 4 days to put together. It's not insignificant. I mean, but editorial comment, I guess, agree with Jim's point. The records we produce are produced with taxpayer dollars. They should be accessible to all. How we manage producing them in the course of doing our business that, you know, the charges that you all have given us, that's what we're trying to balance here, and do it in a customer service oriented way that's clear and accessible, people understand why we're doing what we're doing.
I think one of the challenges we have right now to providing electronic documents is a lot of our documents aren't electronic. The majority of them are in paper format right now. So first we have to get them electronic, and then we can make them more accessible. But slowly we're working on that. However, that's not where we are currently.
And I think that would be also another opportunity that I worry we'd be foreclosing in a statement about not creating new electronic records from paper, where if someone is requesting a paper copy of something and you're going to run it through a copier, we can create an electronic file at that point, and the next request is seconds instead of minutes or hours. So I think I think it's an altruistic intent at this point. You need to say, well, I'm going to scan this while I'm copying it anyways. We're not requiring that, but I would hate to see the policy used as a reason to not do those kinds of forward and getting us forward ready for getting rid of all of our paper eventually. So that's, I guess, if there's a way to incorporate that kind of altruism of using these requests for paper to go to electronic records, so that this is a diminishing problem in the future, I think that'd be great.
I support that. I had a question about another stipulation. There's a line in here that says no person is allowed to copy a record using equipment other than that maintained by the city.
Yes. That is, I believe that actually is in statute as well, is that that a municipality can if the municipality has the equipment on site, they can require that that's what's used to reproduce a record. So, for example, we do not allow individuals to take photographs of documents. They have to, if they want the document to take with them, they have to make a copy of it and we provide a copy machine for them to do that. So that way we can have more control over the record itself and ensure that the document is the integrity of the document will be maintained, as far as it's not getting damaged by somebody running it through their own personal copier that they brought in so they can save money, and then it's unusable in the future. So the statute does allow for the municipality to designate whether or not they will require municipally maintained equipment to be used for those reproductions.
I think what came to mind for me is that idea of photographing records with your phone. I know like the state already came out against that. I don't know. For me, from an environmental standpoint, I don't see, I guess more towards where Jim is going. I would like that to be an option to reduce photocopying. But I understand there's some conflict there.
Yeah, and part of it is, after speaking with the clerks about this, is part of it is the integrity of the document itself. If it's photographed multiple times with a flash, it can start to deteriorate the quality. And some of the documents we have are very old. And we've got some street files that are they're close to 100 years old, that there's a concern about the quality of the document itself deteriorating by repeated photographs or treatment in that manner.
Could that be explicitly stated so that people do have the option to photograph something from 10 years ago on their own? Or if the custodian basically can make the call that because of the fragility of the document, they can require it to be copied only on equipment owned by the city. In all other cases, the requester is free to?
That's something we could look into to see if there's any other concerns.
So I think the state's kind of split on that right now. It's not resolved whether taking pictures is okay or not.
Well, I think the other part of that too is like, then how do you collect fee for the time involved?
That's the bottom line. We need to make money, right? The city needs to make money off services.
Well, I think it's more to recover costs from services. We're not trying to use this as a profit.
Okay, that's a better word for it. But if you're concerned about a taxpayer from the city paying again on something are you saying that they should be discounted because they're a resident? I mean, there's multiple non-residents getting public records from the city, right?
No, so what I was saying is it would be nice if folks could take advantage of being able to just photograph a record versus having to make a photocopy. But there's an issue there about the document integrity, but also how do you collect the fee if the fee is tied to the actual copying?
Well, we have a
staff
per
time.
hour or per minute staff time charge too, so 33 cents a minute for staff time over 30 minutes, right? So that's irrelevant. That's aside from the copy charges. So you could save a little bit of money if it's not a fragile document by photographing. You could sit down, spend 3 hours photographing 2,000 pages. If you want to save the copying costs, you still have to pay the staff time it took to put all those pages in front of you. That's how I would read the fee schedule that's there.
So when a person, a paralegal, a lawyer, or a realtor comes into the office, the state statute says we can recharge, it just recently passed by legislature that we charge $4 per hour and $1 per copy for every page that they photocopy.
So I think we really are,
Two different.
yeah, we're talking about two different things. I think it's worth, this is a good conversation, and I think before we move forward to a public hearing, I think we need to clarify some things and give you some more guidance about your options moving forward. I do think we need to separate out, the land records where, paralegals are in the vault doing their own thing without us,
Right.
vast majority of the time, and what they're paying for is the copies, which then become legal documents that then they use for things. And I think there's some concern about photographs for that versus, but anyway, I feel like we owe you a lot of some more information about the difference potentially between land records that are become legal documents versus, again, just using the invoices for our attorneys for the last year. Those are two different, in my mind, those are two different records requests, and I think we need to flesh this out a little more to give you guidance on how to move forward.
Was there any public comment? No. Okay.
Can I say one other thing?
Yeah.
So this is not related to your consideration of this policy, but I want to call out that you might be wondering why the planning and zoning manager is presenting a public records
I was
policy.
curious, actually.
I think this is one of the things that I love about this team that I want to brag to you about, which is in a leadership team meeting maybe a month ago, Eric was saying we really need a policy that better communicates to our community how we treat public records requests. And so in my fit of, oh my God, how am I going to do another thing? I was like, great, go do it. And he has gone and done it. And I think that this team as a group is really exceptional at stepping up when they identify a need or a gap and filling in that gap. And in this case, it was Eric putting thought into something that was much beyond his job requirements and scope of influence, but all of our team does that from time to time. So I just wanted to brag on him and the team a little bit.
Nice work.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
So shall we move to item G, discussion, FY20 policy priorities and strategy update on housing.
Good evening. This will be a much more truncated report than the prior two that I've given you, as this is our second goal update on housing. So I'm not giving you the whole update on the background of housing in the city of Winooski, period. So we have 3 priorities for implementation this year. They are to establish the policies and procedures for the Housing Trust Fund, to fully utilize Firehouse and data to inform housing discussions and operations, and to implement the Champlain Housing Trust pre-development agreement, and all of those are proceeding as planned. The Housing Commission came to you with an update on the Housing Trust Fund policies and procedures in August, and we received your feedback then. We have since revised the document to account for that feedback. So now really where the Housing Trust Fund sits is we've made the policy decisions about that, and so it kind of sits in my fully on my agenda to make sure that we have the agreement with Opportunities Credit Union for the terms of servicing those loans, and also to work with Champlain Housing Trust for compliance monitoring. So that's background stuff that's going on with me, and as any policy questions come up, I'll take them back to the Housing Commission and then bring them back to you. But it's my expectation that we should have this fully vetted, up and running by January 1st of 2020. So more to come on that. Fully utilizing Firehouse and data to inform housing discussions and operations. We continue to use Firehouse for all of our housing inspections, so that is data that continues to be built out. In addition to that, I do an annual ask to our our rental registry for voluntary sharing of pricing for all of the rental units in the city, and I've had unbelievable success with that in the past. So I believe last year it was 70% of total rental units were included in that. So it gives us a really, really fine point look at what rental pricing is in the city. I've done it again this year, and we haven't compiled that data yet, so it's still coming in, but I'll be reporting out on that to you at the January gentrification monitoring report, which is when I usually do that. And in terms of implementing the Champlain Housing Trust pre-development agreement, we have been working with CHT, and in addition, we brought in Vermont Integrated Architects. Vermont Integrated Architecture, who is the consulting firm that we worked with to do the feasibility space modeling study for potentially moving City Hall down to O'Brien Community Center, the front of that parcel, just to be sure that we are reserving for ourselves the amount of space that we'll need for that footprint in the future. While we move forward with CHT, and I believe that we just recently, in the last 2 weeks, we received some plans of what that might look like. So we need to go back and review that with VIA and CHT, nail that down, and we should be able to continue moving forward with that project. New ideas pending resource availability. I don't have any new information on either of these than what I shared last time. Those two are review housing standards and public building registry, and to bring the Winooski Housing Authority fully onto the public building registry. We are working on both of those. And as part of the Housing Commission work plan, we committed ourselves to providing monitoring reports on a couple of things. One of them is incoming housing development in comparison with our affordability targets, and the other is outcomes for the Housing Trust Fund. So since we haven't been giving out any Housing Trust Fund money, I won't be reporting on that, but I have provided for you a comparison of the incoming currently permitted development and the housing targets. And you'll see that we continue to exceed the affordable housing targets set by the Housing Commission, which is 15% of our incoming housing should be affordable to low-income households. I am happy to take questions on that very short report.
Do we have any sense of what the rest of the ratio is for the approved housing development in terms of the moderate and high?
I don't, I get that information at, basically, people report on the low income component of it because they're generally going through various programs to get that. So I know up front when the development is happening who intends to go for low income housing tax credits or priority housing status through the state, which would require them to report on that. But in terms of the actual cost, I don't see that until it comes through the rental registry, or else I see it when I see it on Craigslist. So I watch that also. So I look at what's being what the pricing is being advertised, but they don't have to report on it in advance.
Any other questions? Thank you for the public. Any public comment? Thank you for the update, Heather.
Yeah, of course. Thank you,
Heather. So the last time on our agenda was added during agenda review today. I don't know if you all saw this or not, but midday today we received via email from the Attorney General's office a letter about opiate legislation in a class action suit that the Attorney General is recommending municipalities to participate in. We added it to today's agenda because it's an opt-out scenario, and the opt-out has to be submitted by November 22nd. We won't have a regular meeting before then, so it's a decision we would need to make tonight. I in case you didn't get a chance to read it, and it's not included in the packet here, I did take some notes from the FAQs. So the goal of this class action suit is to recover money to help fight the opioids epidemic, provide prevention and treatment services going forward, and change defendants' practices. Class action is being set up to maximize negotiating power. It's structured such that there are some like principal municipalities that are sort of leading the class action, but we could be opting in to be a part of any settlement that came out of it. There's no guarantee that there will be a settlement. If there is a settlement, there's like an allocation set up, sort of per capita. So Chittenden County would receive a certain amount to be distributed. We would be noticed of a potential settlement and have the opportunity online to approve or decline. The settlement would be complete with 75% approval by the participating municipalities in the class action. And participation doesn't, I don't know what the technical word I want is, but participating in this class action suit doesn't mean we can't participate in other suits on the same topic. Like it doesn't like preempt anything. Mm-hmm. We are not at this time that I'm aware of, but should there be a future occurrence. If you have a second and can access your email, you could see that there. What we are deciding tonight is if we want to opt out of this or if we would like to participate. Again, the Attorney General's office is encouraging that we do participate.
I think it makes sense to participate. One other thing that it says in the letter is that we can participate without having to file a lawsuit on our own, hire attorneys, and incur those fees and costs. So right now, there's no cost to us to participate, and I think that that's really important.
Makes total sense. Yeah.
I agree. I agree. I think anything that can come out of this. I mean, addiction's everywhere, especially in Chittenden County, and Winooski's been hit with it. I think if something could happen positive out of this, it could be some funding towards education or even help.
Mm-hmm. Prevention and treatment services.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So I agree. I think we go all in on this.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Any questions from the public? I would entertain a motion then to approve opting into the opiate legislation.
So move.
Second.
Motion by Mike, second by Jim. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. With that, we come to the end of our agenda. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Amy, second by Hal. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you.